Hi.
Hello.
Welcome to week 4.
Yes.
This is
A
fun.
whole month worth of doing
I'm
this.
enjoying hanging out with you guys.
It has been really fun.
Are you enjoying hanging out with us?
We hope so. There's no one here yet, so they don't know.
Yeah, but now there's people on.
Great.
So if you are joining for the first time, welcome. I'm going to move this over a little bit. There we go. If you're joining for the first time, welcome. And if you are coming back, welcome. We're stoked to have you guys.
Yes.
If you are enjoying these and you don't want to miss future lessons, hit the little subscribe button if you're on YouTube, or the like button if you're on Facebook, so that you're notified when we do these on a regular basis. And whether you're watching live or not, feel free to leave comments and we will either answer them if you're on the call live.
Comment later.
Yeah, we'll comment on them later if you have questions or you want access to resources and stuff like that. I'm really excited about today's lesson.
Today is a really important lesson. It's one that when I learned about it brought a whole lot of things into perspective.
I like how we're like casual churching it today.
Casual Sunday today. Comfortable Sunday.
So sorry, what were you saying?
Just that learning this gave me a lot of new perspectives into conflict in marriage and why whether or not you have conflict doesn't mean you have a horrible marriage, kind of a thing.
Did you know that conflict is the main reason that I broke up with almost every single girl that I dated?
I think it's common. I think it's really a common thing to do.
My pattern was that I would like fall hard for a girl, really, really like her. We'd go on a bunch of dates. We'd start being exclusive, and then something would come up. And it was a problem that I didn't think we should have. Like, we shouldn't be having this problem,
right? Especially
Especially this early on. Or, I can't believe she's thinking this way or doing this way. Like, if this is the way she shows up or does this or engages with me in this way, then this is not going to work out long term.
Right.
And because I was scared to have the conversation, I had this like presumption that the problems shouldn't exist. I would just break up and then go through that same pattern over and over and over and over again. And I was really bad at like understanding the purpose of conflict and understanding how to manage conflict and understanding how to manage my emotions. And so today we're going to try and start to get into that, because whether you're like a YSA and you're looking for the person, or whether you found your person and you're like on your way to getting married, or whether you're already married and you're watching this and you're like, we need some help dealing with conflict. If you've never heard these concepts before, a light bulb is going to go on and you're going to go, oh,
this makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
Yes. So what I want to emphasize is that the absence of conflict does not equal a healthy relationship. And I think that's something that we might think growing up. Maybe we grew up we never saw our parents argue, or
that was me.
You never saw your parents argue. We were talking with someone this week and they said the same thing. I saw my parents argue, but not excessively. But again, the absence of conflict does not mean you have a healthy relationship. There is
Write that down.
Necessary conflict that contributes to a healthy relationship. And it seems backwards, but it's true. And it just reminds me of Paul in Corinthians when he was talking about the thorn in his side and how he asked God 3 times to take the specific thorn in his side out. And I'm assuming the thorn in his side was a weakness that he had or a problem that he had that he just wanted it to go away. And despite asking 3 times, God came back and said, my grace is sufficient for you. This is just a problem that you're going to have to live with for the rest of your life. And Paul recognized that it was okay to have this problem and that it was actually making him stronger and closer to Christ to have this problem. So I can't remember exactly what the scripture is. I'll find it and we'll link to it. But it just talks about, he says specifically, when I am weak, then I am strong. And we hear this concept a lot in the church that God gives us weaknesses, not only so we can be humble, but so that we can learn and we can grow. And there's opposition in all things. And that's no different in marriage. There is a certain aspect of opposition and conflict that is necessary for growing closer together and eternal progression.
Yeah, becoming a better person.
Right.
Like without a little bit of resistance, you aren't going to be exposed to your weaknesses and your flaws.
Right.
Just like if you want to build muscles, you got to go tear those muscles down first. If you want to build yourself as a human being, you need to like confront some of the weak parts of yourself, or the parts that aren't very strong, and tear them down so that they can be rebuilt.
So today we're talking about conflict in marriage. Now, this is such a broad topic.
We could
one that we
do
could
a dozen lessons on this.
Seriously do a dozen lessons on. And so today we're going to talk about a specific part of conflict in marriage, and that is the difference between solvable problems and unsolvable problems.
What? There's different kinds of conflict?
There are different kinds of conflict.
Okay, this blew my mind when I learned this, because I always used to think that conflict was conflict. And then when I realized that there's two different types of conflict, I was like, wait, what? Like, that means you probably approach those two different types of conflict differently, right?
Yes, it requires a different approach.
Did you say what they were already?
Solvable versus unsolvable
Solvable problems versus unsolvable problems. So in your marriage, there are these two types of conflict. You get solvable problems and unsolvable problems. And I want you to guess in the chat right now, what % of your problems are solvable and what % are unsolvable? And I'm literally going to sit here and I want to see what your guesses are. Because when I learned this statistic, I was like, what? It surprised me a lot. So I'm curious to see what you guys think. Like, what % of problems or struggles in a marriage are solvable, and what % are unsolvable, unresolvable problems? They never go away.
Take a guess. We'll sit here for a second. I'm gonna move this closer because you keep shadowing me.
Oh, just put it out here in front of the computer. That works. Well, now we have a ring in the. Whatever, it's fine. Perfect right there. 97% solvable, Charlene says. Anybody else have a guess? 99% solvable.
You guys are going to be blown
You guys
away.
are so good guess, Cassandra. Okay.
These were my guesses too. This is exactly what I thought. I thought that the majority of problems have got to be solvable.
Should we drop the truth?
Let's drop the truth bomb.
69% of your problems are unsolvable problems.
Unsolvable.
Almost 70%, more than 2/3 of the problems you face in marriage are unresolvable. They don't have a solution. They never go away. The majority.
This blew my mind. I had no idea. And this is research done by John Gottman over decades, that he would study couples and he would study the way they fought, and he would study their conflicts and which problems would come up in their marriages. And then every 4 years they would bring the same couples back, and they were finding that the problems that they were experiencing 4 years prior were the exact same problems they were experiencing today. And in another 4 years, the exact same problems that they were having 4 years ago, the same problems. And this is both good and bad news. So the good news is that you don't have to have a conflict-free marriage to have an incredible marriage, because every single couple, the average of unsolvable conflicts is 69%. With that, the nice thing is that what am I trying to say with this? There's a quote that he says
here. You don't have to resolve your marriage conflicts for your marriage to thrive.
Here's the thing. If you really, really think that you shouldn't be having these problems, maybe it's time to end the relationship and move on to someone else. You're just going to pick up.
You're trading one set of 69%
problems.
of conflicts for another set of 69%.
Kind of like what Nate was saying, is he would break up with a girlfriend if they were having these conflicts, and then he would get in another relationship and have more conflicts.
Still
and
two-thirds.
they might be different conflicts, but you're going to have conflict regardless. So the bad news is sometimes that can create some discomfort.
Yeah.
And some frustration.
But one of
in your relationship.
One of my favorite quotes is by Carl Jung. And he says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. I'm going to say it again because it's really good. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So let me give you an example of how this is making something unconscious conscious. So if you went your whole life expecting that every problem that you faced in your relationships that could be solvable, and you tried to solve those problems, if you try and solve an unsolvable problem, what happens?
Frustration.
You get frustrated, you get angry, you get resentful, you get like upset. It causes even more tension and stress and pressure and anxiety. And man, if you try and solve an unsolvable problem, it's ridiculously infuriating. But once you realize that over 2/3 of the problems in your relationship are unsolvable problems, and this thing clicks in your head, that becomes conscious. Like maybe this thing that keeps coming up over and over is not something that can be solved. So maybe I can take a different approach. All of a sudden, making that conscious in your brain means that you don't just chalk things up to fate anymore. You're not just thinking like, oh, well, I guess we're just not meant to be if we're just having this conflict over and over again. Or I guess like we're just never going to be good at communicating because we just keep having these same arguments over and over. Now you're normal. Now everything is completely normal. And now you have control. If you can identify these as perpetual problems, you have a choice. You're not a victim of the fact that these problems keep coming up and thinking that you're broken. It's like, oh, we're normal and we can do something about it. We can approach this differently because you do approach solvable problems differently than unsolvable problems. Does that make sense?
Right.
So just being conscious of the fact that there are both solvable and unsolvable problems gives you power to actually make positive choices to deal with these issues when they come up differently than you would otherwise. And that means your life is no longer chalked up to fate, it's chalked up to choice. You get to choose how you deal with these issues, which is really empowering.
By saying that 69% of your relational problems are unsolvable, we're not saying that you're doomed to a life of frustration and that you are doomed to constantly having your boundaries crossed and things like that. No, there are ways to manage these unsolvable problems, and we're going to talk a little bit about both today.
Yeah. So should we start by identifying what some solvable problems look like and what some unsolvable problems look like?
We want you to be able to distinguish between the two. Can we get rid of this what percentage?
Yes.
So first, let's talk about what's the difference between solvable and unsolvable. So what are some solvable problems, Nate?
Solvable problems. Solvable problems, a good way to identify a solvable problem is that it's on a time frame.
Yes.
A solvable problem is like, hey, where are we going to eat dinner tonight? I don't know. Do you know?
No.
Okay, well, we got a problem and we're going to solve it.
Well, I want Mexican food.
Okay, so I am cool with Mexican food, but I don't want to go to Cafe Rio.
But I only want to go to Cafe Rio.
Okay. Can we go to Cafe Rio tonight? And then maybe next time we'll go to the different one?
Sure.
Solved.
Or you don't come to a conclusion, but tomorrow comes, tonight goes away, and the problem disappears.
Yep. Other solvable problems.
What are we gonna do for Christmas this year?
Ooh,
with the in-laws?
What are we doing with the holidays for the holidays? And you might think that this is a perpetual problem because every year there's a Christmas, but if all you're talking about is this year, you make a decision. And then you don't have to make that decision again.
Right.
Like you're done. And then next year, if it comes up again, you can renegotiate and do something a little bit differently.
Should I take this new job?
Solvable problem.
Solvable problem.
Yep. Should we give some examples here?
Yeah, let's give some examples.
Let's see. 2 and 3. Okay, here's a
solvable problem.
So Helena gets together with her friend every Monday. And Jonathan, her husband, wants to take a class together with him. I'm sorry, I'm not reading very well. Helena gets together with her friend every Monday night. Jonathan wants her to take a class together with him, but the class is only held on Monday nights. Helena doesn't want to give up her girls' night out. What do? Is it a solvable or perpetual problem? It is a solvable problem. Because Helena and Jonathan can resolve this issue in many different ways. They can switch off weekly between class and hanging out together, or maybe friends can change girls' night to a different night, or maybe Jonathan could find a different class on another night at a different studio or a different place. One of them could simply agree to sacrifice one of the activities. There's a lot of ways to like manage this problem, but once they find a solution, the problem goes away. That's the point.
Right.
And even though the class might be a weekly thing and the girls' night might be a weekly thing, if they can come to a consensus and make a decision and the problem goes away, then it's not a perpetual problem. Here's another example. Do you want to read number 3?
Sure. Mike just inherited $2,000 from his great aunt. He wants to use it to buy home exercise equipment, but Mary thinks they should save it for a down payment on a house. Mike says the inheritance is really not enough to make a dent in a down payment, so why not use it for something they can enjoy now? But Mary believes that every little bit adds up and they have to save as much as they can all the time.
So, solvable or unsolvable problem? When I read this the first time, I was like, this is an unsolvable problem. But really, it's solvable because once they decide what to do with these $2,000, they don't have to make that decision again.
Right.
You know, they can have the conversation about, do we do something fun? Do we invest in something more long-term? Do we split the difference and go 50-50? You know, does Mike have more of a say because it's the inheritance he got from his grandma? Or do they make this decision together? Like once they make the decision of what to do with the $2,000, the problem goes away. This
isn't a repeat problem unless he has another great aunt that's going to pass away at some time and give him $2,000 more.
But hidden in this solvable problem might be a perpetual problem. And the perpetual problem, and we can start talking about perpetual problems now.
And perpetual equals unsolvable.
Unsolvable. Those problems that keep coming up over and over and over again. The unsolvable problem here might be that Mike is more of a spender and likes to have fun with his money, and his wife is more of a saver, and she's a little bit more thrifty, and she likes to like invest the money and save it up and make sure that like they always have a nest egg and stuff like that. And their attitudes towards money might be unsolvable problems, but the way that they spend this $2,000 is totally a solvable problem. Does that make sense?
Are we clear with everybody so far?
Let's talk a little bit more about unsolvable problems.
So unsolvable problems have a lot to do with who somebody is at their core. Like Nate was saying before.
What are some of our unsolvable problems? Just so we can be transparent. I like being honest with our class.
I have always struggled
attendees
with punctuality. And Nate has always been 15 minutes early to everything. So even though I understand the importance of being on time and I really want to be on time, that doesn't mean I still don't struggle with
the struggle is real.
And this is something that creates a lot of butting heads in our relationship. So someone is notoriously late, someone is notoriously on time. That's an unsolvable problem. I am more of an early riser. Angilyn? I'm more of a late. Not so much. She's more of a night owl. One of you might be a little bit more cluttery, and the other one might be a neat freak. One of you might be a saver. The other one might be a spender. One of you might be more extroverted. The other one might be a little bit more introverted. Mm-hmm. And there's times where those things cause problems. Like there's times where, here's some mistakes that I made early on in our marriage. Angilyn, as the introvert, she works as a nurse, and she spends all day at her nursing job taking care of people. And she's amazing at it. She's like won awards. She's like known as one of the best nurses at the hospital and even in the hospital system that she works in. She's incredible. But also it takes a toll on her as an introvert to like just care for people all day. And early on in our marriage, I'd be excited for her to come home, and I'd plan like double dates and activities and fun things for us to do when she got home. And I learned really quick that on the nights that Angilyn comes home, she needs recharge time. Like yes. She needs to be alone. She needs to have like time to decompress. She needs to be able to like veg on social media or watch a TV show or read a book or just go to sleep and not interact with people. And there have been some nights where like I have on accident planned like a party or a get together or a double date or something. And it's been like, she's made some sacrifices, but it's really hard for her. But then there's other times where she knows something's really important and she's willing to make a sacrifice and say, yes, we can do this, even though I know I'm going to be exhausted, and she can kind of brace herself for it. But that's going to be a perpetual problem throughout our entire marriage, is that our entire lives. I like to hang out with people. I like to be in groups. I like to be in front of people. I like to speak. And Angilyn is a lot more introverted. She's happy to just like hang out at home and lay low and spend time with her close group of friends, but not necessarily a group of 50 people that she doesn't know. Right. So again, just to reiterate, these unsolvable problems have a lot to do with who somebody is at their core and just the way that they are. And that's not to say people can't change, but that's not the goal. The goal isn't to try and change your partner. The goal isn't to try and turn them into somebody that they're not. It's to accept them for who they are and then to manage those unsolvable problems in a way that creates harmony.
Yes. So that is the key. I want you to think about this. Like, she said something really important here that's worth writing down if you've got a little notebook. Unsolvable problems, they're just not problems that run rampant in your marriage. They're problems that need to be managed.
Mhm.
Just because they don't have an answer doesn't mean you can't find ways to deal with them in a way that minimizes the impact on your life. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So we're going to talk a little bit today about how to manage these how to identify and manage these unsolvable problems. And my hope is that already maybe you're thinking about either past relationships or current relationships where like maybe there's some things that drive you nuts about each other. And you're starting to think like, oh, I need to approach this a little bit differently than a problem that is solvable. And maybe the reason that this has been driving me so nuts is because I've been approaching an unsolvable problem with the strategies of a solvable problem. Like I'm trying to negotiate and like I'm trying to, just make a decision to move forward and hope that it doesn't come back up again, but it will. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of these strategies. One other thing I want to hit on, though, that Angilyn touched on, and I don't want it to get glossed over, and it's really important, is that if you noticed, a lot of these things that cause unsolvable problems are like personality traits.
Mm-hmm.
They are things about like, I'm an extroverted person, she's an introverted person. If Angilyn was extroverted or if I was introverted, I wouldn't be me anymore and she wouldn't be her anymore. She'd be a different person. And one of the most sad things that I see on a regular basis is when I'm talking to couples and you hear them say something like, man, if she would just be extroverted, my marriage would be so much better. My life would be a lot easier. If he was just more budget conscious, if he was just more like neat and tidy, or if she was just a little bit more laid back, maybe our marriage would be better. And what people don't realize when they're saying these things is that they're basically telling their partner, if you were somebody different, I would be happy. Not cool.
Yeah.
Like we're supposed to love each other for how we are. That's why we married each other. And so there's got to be ways to deal with these emotions and deal with these unsolvable problems in a way that creates more connection and that doesn't make you basically tell your partner, I'd be happier if I was married to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yes, makes sense.
Should we dive in?
Yes, let's dive in. Do
you want to talk about solvable problems first?
How to approach solvable problems?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I think it's worth talking about the soften startup.
Yes.
You think so?
Yeah.
So regardless of whether you're dealing with a solvable or unsolvable problem, one of the pieces of research that I think is really useful is that the way that you start a conflict conversation has a direct impact on the way that it ends.
They studies show that like 96% of the time, the way that you start an argument is the way that it ends.
So if you start with aggression, if you start with hostility, if you start with impatience and frustration, and you kind of come out on the attack, guess how the conversation is probably going to end?
Probably not very nicely.
Not going to go so well.
Right.
So one of the things you need to learn to do, I'm going to turn this banner off. One of the things you need to learn to do is have what's called a soften startup. So you start the conversation in a gentle way. Do you want to talk a little bit about what a soften startup is?
Yes. So soften startup is exactly what it sounds like. It's a soft way to approach a situation that can potentially be uncomfortable for both partners. So, for example, let's think of an example of a problem.
Okay.
So let's say this weekend, we're going to go to Nate's house and this isn't true. This is just a hypothetical situation. Let's say that Nate's mom always makes these comments to me that make me feel bad.
Little nitpicky comments.
Nate doesn't ever, it feels like he doesn't come to my defense in those moments. And I know that this weekend is coming up and I'm getting anxious about what his mom's going to say about me. And I'm afraid that he's not going to come to my defense.
I'm not going to be on your team.
This is a conflict. It's a solvable conflict, but it's one that we need to approach that's going to create discomfort. So there's a way I can approach him that's like, Nate, your mom does this, and you never help me.
Every time we go to your house, I feel so stupid. Your mom just criticizes me, and I feel like I'm the worst person in the world, and you never come to my defense, and you always take your mom's side, and it's like you love her more than you love me, and I'm sick of it. Like, not going to go well.
How do you think Nate is going to react if I come at him on the attack like that?
Type it in the comments.
Probably not very...
I'll get very defensive.
He's probably going to get defensive. So another way that I could approach the situation is I could come to Nate and I could say, Nate, I am worried about this weekend. There's something that I would really like to talk to you about. When you have a few minutes, can we talk about it?
Guess what's going to happen to me? Spidey sense. Hey, my wife has something going on she wants to talk to me about, and it's obviously important. I want to open up the lanes of conversation. So I'll probably turn to her and go, yeah, babe, what's going on? Tell me what's up.
Or if he's in a situation where he's maybe trying to do work, or
I'll probably say something like, hey,
how about in 15
let
minutes,
me wrap this up.
or...
Can you give me 15, 20 minutes and then we can talk?
So a really good way to start with a soften startup
Number one
is ask permission. Ask permission to talk about something hard. So like I said, honey, I have something that's been really bothering me. I'd really love to talk to you about it. When would be a good time for us to talk about this? Let's say there's been times when Nate's come to me and I've been in the middle of doing something for work and I can't focus on him in that moment. So him asking me permission gives me an opportunity to say, okay, let me finish this first and we will talk about it in, let's say, 20 minutes. And that way I can give him my full attention and I can prepare myself for something difficult. I can mentally prepare myself. Okay, he might say something that might upset me. So it gives you time to get in the mindset for the conversation. So the first step in a soften startup is to ask permission. What now?
Part 2.
Mm-hmm.
Complain, don't blame. So there's a difference between expressing a complaint and being critical. A criticism is typically an attack on a person's character. The words "you always" or "you never" are almost always associated with a criticism.
Mm-hmm.
You always do this to me. You're always late. You never follow through. Like, you never keep your promises. You never defend me. You always take her side. Those are character assassinations.
And those will immediately put your partner on the defense.
Yep. So we start out by asking for permission is step 1. Step 2 is you complain, don't blame. When you complain, you talk about a situation. And I want to emphasize here, the whole goal of a softened startup, the whole goal of having this conversation is to prevent your partner from going into fight or flight mode. If you guys don't know what fight or flight mode is, you probably do. You've heard people talk about it, but it's one of the biggest threats to your marriage. It is an instinct. It happens without you even thinking about it. And it's when your heart rate increases to about 100 beats per minute, your adrenaline starts pumping, your eyes dilate, you kind of start getting tunnel vision. You might get like heat on your chest, or you might sweat in your armpits and your palms. You might get like knots in your stomach or a tightness in your shoulders or in your lower back. Like, that is fight or flight mode. And it's your body going into either putting up your guns to punch back, or like, I'm going to run away, or sometimes freeze, like you freeze and shut down. And so some people call it fight, flight, or freeze. But the whole reason that we use the soften startup is to do everything that we can to keep our partner from going into fight or flight mode. And the reason that this is important is that when you go into fight or flight mode, when that like very basic instinctual piece of your brain at the very base of your skull kicks into high gear, what happens is that the frontal part of your brain, the part of your brain that's responsible for like logical reasoning and empathy and compassion, completely shuts down. And the crazy thing is that you become physiologically incapable of thinking logically.
Yep.
And that's why arguments are so gross. Like that's why they're so hard to deal with, is because if you do kicked into fight or flight mode, your ability to be compassionate and empathetic and kind and understanding goes right out the window. It's literally impossible.
You feed off of each other. Both parties start getting this adrenaline and this fight or flight, and then there's no way that this is going to end well.
So the goal here in the softened startup is to do everything you can to keep your partner's heart rate low, to bring up a topic that's like frustrating you, but keep your partner's heart rate low, keep their brain in the like rational, empathetic, compassionate, like keep those switches flipped on without turning everything off. So first thing is you ask for permission. Second thing is you complain, don't blame. So complaining is talking about the circumstances. Like, hey honey, last time, if we go with Angilyn's example, last time we visited your mom's house, she said some things that made me feel really insecure as a mom. That's a fact. She said some things that made me feel really insecure as a mom. I would really like to enjoy being at your parents' house. And I sometimes feel a little uneasy, or like I feel a little judged, and I want to ask something from you. So you start with that complaint. This is the situation. These are the facts. This is my experience. Mm-hmm. You can use and there's this recipe formula that everybody always hears, and they kind of judge the therapy community for using this, but it's like I feel blank about blank and I need blank. It's a good formula to help you identify your emotion. You help you communicate your emotions and your needs. I feel blank about blank and I need blank. But I actually prefer a different script. Do you remember? Do you know the script I'm talking about? The story I'm telling myself?
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
We use this a lot in our marriage to help us have softened startups.
This is a way to take full responsibility for your own perception of what's going on. So just because I feel upset that Nate doesn't seem to come to my defense doesn't mean that maybe he doesn't even realize that it's going on.
Let's use a real example.
Okay.
Like, let's use an example of you coming home and I'm playing video games.
Okay.
Because that's happened.
And so...
And how do you feel when you come home sometimes and you've worked a really long day and I'm playing video games? And then maybe you try and talk to me about your day and I'm like zoned in on the TV.
My perception of the situation is that Nate doesn't care about me. He doesn't care that I've been at work all day and that he doesn't want to connect with me. These are my perceptions of what's going on.
So you could come out at me and say, the bad way would be,
you're always playing video games when I come home. You don't care about me.
Can you just turn this stupid thing off and we can have a normal conversation? Why are you acting like a teenager? So irresponsible the way you spend your time. There's a lot of things she could say. But on occasion, what she has said, which has been really helpful, is
the story I'm telling myself right now is that you would rather be playing video games instead of spending time with me, and that you don't really care that I've been at work all day and you haven't done anything when I've been gone. That takes, when you say it's the story that I'm telling myself, I'm taking full responsibility that is my own perception, and I am leaving room for the fact that my perception could be wrong. So that is a tool that we have used that has actually really, really helped. Because when Nate comes to me and says, the story I'm telling myself is this about the situation, I can say to myself, okay, I can see why you're perceiving that. It's not true.
Yeah,
but
and the next question is,
can
you help me clear up? If that's not the truth, can you help me correct my story?
The story I'm telling myself is blank. Is that true? And then they can say yes or no. And if they say no, can you help me correct my perception? Can you help me have a better idea of what's actually going on?
Is this helpful for you guys? If this is helpful, like, let us know in the comments. But I'm hoping that this is like kind of making sense.
This is such a dense and it's so hard to compile it all into this short amount of time that it.
One of our commitments when we started this is to give you real practical application stuff and not just talk about floofy stuff. And so this is literally, if you can practice these steps, it will help you navigate both perpetual and or solvable and unsolvable conflicts.
And these are just options of things that you can do. So the first thing you do is you ask permission. Like we said, you create an environment that is conducive to a difficult conversation. Then you complain, don't blame. There's lots of ways you can do that. You can do it like the way we do it with the story I'm telling myself is that true? Can you help me correct it? Or there's the I feel blank about blank and I need blank.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many different tools that you can use in this situation to help you.
Sorry, honey.
That's okay. Complain and not blame.
Yeah. Yep. And so then you describe what's happening without judgment. And we kind of already talked about that. Recusing the judgment will help somebody not state the facts. You came home, you promised me you'd help me with the dishes, and now we're getting ready for bed and the dishes are still dirty. And I'm feeling hurt by that. I'm feeling hurt that you said you'd help me with the dishes and you didn't. That's the facts. Mm-hmm. And you take the judgment out of it about you're a terrible person.
You never help me with the dishes. You always let me down.
Yep. You take all that out and just stick with the facts. Let's see. We got some comments coming in. Okay. Yes, it's helping. Okay. Perfect. Good.
Great.
So glad. The last couple steps that we have listed out here are really simple and straightforward. It's simply be polite, be appreciative. We talked about the power of appreciation last week, didn't we?
Yes.
Was it last week or 2 weeks ago?
We have talked about it.
Yeah. Appreciation is huge. And it's important to not just go through your entire marriage, pointing out all the areas where your partner's falling short. It's also really great to say, hey, look, I know you're really trying here. Like I saw you, like, I know you paused your video game when I came in and tried to connect with me, and that meant a lot to me. But when you kept playing, it kind of sent me the message, hey, maybe I'm not that important. But I really appreciated that you cleaned the kitchen while I was away, or the dinner's cooking when I walked in the door. And even though you were playing games, I know that you were thinking about me today.
It's like the sandwich philosophy.
Yeah.
Philosophy.
The positive
philosophy.
You got it.
You start with something positive, then you throw in maybe what's bothering you, and then you end with something positive. And one of the ways that I do that is by speaking to Nate's character. When there's something that bothers me, I don't know if you've noticed that I do this, but I usually say something along the lines of, I know you didn't mean to do this because you are a patient, you're kind, you're loving. I know that the hurt that I'm experiencing right now was not intentional on your part.
Yeah.
And I think that I don't know, you can speak to this, but I think that kind of helps soften you a little bit to think, okay.
My wife doesn't think I'm a terrible husband. My wife doesn't think I'm out to get her. She gets that I'm a good man. And what she's saying here is that even though I'm a great husband, I just kind of screwed up in this moment, and I can own that instead of taking on the entire identity of being a terrible husband. Right. It's like a really smooth move on her part. She's really good at it.
And that's not to be manipulative or anything, but it's genuine.
Just helpful.
It's just, I know that he is a kind person, and the fact that he snapped at me was not something that is in his character. But he did snap at me, and it did hurt my feelings, so it's something that needs to be resolved.
Oops. Sorry, I hit the microphone.
That doesn't mean that it's his character to do that.
Yeah.
So.
And the last thing we'll talk about is don't store things up. Well, this isn't the last thing we'll talk about, but in this sequence of how to kind of like start up conversation, don't store things up. So Angela came up with this amazing analogy. Do you want to talk about the dishes analogy?
Sure. So you're doing you make dinner. You have all these pots and pans that you've dirtied, and you put them in the sink. If you clean them right away, it's really easy to get the gunk off. You just run the water over it. It usually comes right off with some hot water, maybe some soap. Some things are a little bit harder to get off than others, but if you do it right away, it goes away.
Cleaning process is not that hard.
And you put the dishes away and the sink is clean. If you make dinner and you dirty all these dishes, then you leave them in the sink, and then the next day you make dinner and you dirty all these dishes and you pile them on top of what's already there, all these things are going to pile up. And then when you go to clean them later, you're going to need to pull out your Rio scrubber pad, and it's not going to be as easy to get this stuff off. It's going to be caked on. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be frustrating. So the idea behind it is to clean it up quick. If you clean it up quick, these things aren't going to build, and it's going to be easier to resolve than later down the road if you've let it build and build. I've heard lots of people say things like pick your battles. We talked about last week how we were going to talk about this pick your battles. I mean, obviously there are situations where you can let things roll off your shoulders.
Well, yeah, like it's important to be responsible for your emotions. And sometimes, like Angilyn does, when if I do something that's hurtful, and sometimes she'll go, my husband didn't mean that. Like, he's a good man and he wasn't trying to be mean to me. And I just can take a deep breath and breathe through it. But if it's really something that sticks, like really something that hurts.
If it's something that you're thinking about a half hour later, it's probably something that needs to be resolved.
Yeah.
And
otherwise what happens is it piles up and piles up and piles up. And then what happens?
And then let's say 6 months down the road, let's give this like crazy amount of time. 6 months down the road, he says something to me that maybe wouldn't have been offensive before, but because I have this huge, overwhelming pile of dishes, he puts this little dish on top and the whole thing just comes crashing down. And now I'm upset and I'm hurt and I'm angry and I'm resentful. And I don't even remember why. I don't even remember why there are the dishes piled at the bottom of the sink.
And it takes a crap ton of time to clean that stuff up.
And then it's
miserable.
And then it's the you did this game. Well, you did this game that goes on forever and ever. And it's just so much easier to clean it up quick, because then you're more able to have this softened startup where you don't already have all this resentment built up.
Yep.
It's just one thing that's happened in this moment that we need to resolve now, so that
and if you practice it, you can do it in seconds. Like, one of the coolest things about mine and Angie's relationship right now that I love so much is that I know some of the things that we deal with are the exact same things that other couples deal with, but we can repair and clean it up in seconds or minutes, where other couples, it takes them days or weeks to get over stuff, or they just never get over it. Like, they just fight and argue and hold grudges and give each other the silent treatment and are passive aggressive and gossip about each other. And because they don't know how to go through like this process of like having a hard conversation, just even starting a hard conversation, they get roadblocked, they get stuck, and it just causes this wedge in their relationship. And Ange and I don't let that wedge stay there. Like, if something comes between us, we clean it up as quickly as possible. And sometimes it only takes like a 3-second conversation, a couple sentences, and then we're back together.
And the reason we can do this is because we clean it up fast.
And we have practice doing it. Right. Sometimes it still feels a little awkward and clunky. But I think one of the things that's really important to understand is that if you're learning something new, it always is going to feel awkward and clunky. If you're playing the piano for the first time and you have never done scales before, like, it's a little awkward to get the fingering. It's a little clunky. You know, if you've ever done a painting class, we did this a couple months ago with my parents. We took a watercolor class. And I just have never really painted before. And it was frustrating that I couldn't get the paint to go where I wanted it to go and make the painting look like I wanted it to look. And I'm like, oh, and like, it just feels a little awkward holding that paintbrush and painting on a canvas that's sitting up. And it just felt awkward. And the same thing is true in your relationships. When you're learning like a new way to communicate or a new way to deal with conflict or a new way to talk about difficult subjects, it's going to feel a little uncomfortable. It might feel a little scripted.
And it's okay to speak to that too. If you're used to having explosive arguments, it might feel weird to do it in a different way, but you can say, honey, I learned about this new concept called a softened startup, and I really think it would help us, and I want to give it a try. It might be a little weird at first, but can we give it a go?
I love, or just like saying something as simple as, I love you too much to argue right now.
Yeah.
When we calm down a little bit, I'd love to have a conversation with you. That's huge. I'd love to hear that.
That's
I love you too much to argue
repair attempt.
Yeah, and we'll get into repair attempts later.
There's
we'll do
so
like
many
another
things
lesson
to talk about with this.
But I want to hit on one last thing before, because I want to equip people with a little bit of a tool for an unsolvable problem. So this is the goal of conflict, especially an unsolvable conflict. A lot of people think like, oh, we have a problem, we need to solve it.
And we need it to just go away.
We need the problem to go away. And what I have found, and what Dr. Gottman talks a lot about, and most other marriage researchers, and one of the things that like really creates a shift in your dynamic is if you shift your perspective to, instead of trying to solve the problems that come up, especially the unsolvable problems, this will open up so many amazing opportunities for you to connect. One of the most beautiful things about conflict is if you approach it the right way, it actually is a gateway to connection. Couples who experience conflict and manage it well end up feeling more trusting towards each other. They have a deeper connection, a deeper bond, because they've overcome obstacles together. It's like having teammates that you've been through all the hard things with, and then come out and won the championship, or going to war and having your foxhole buddies where you've been through like the most difficult times in your life with them, and you always share a special bond with them. You get to have that bond with your partner as well if you approach conflict the right way, because you overcome these challenges, and it can be a really powerful bonding experience. And one of the best things that you can do to overcome these challenges in a really positive way, especially if they're unsolvable problems, is instead of trying to solve the problem, seek mutual understanding. Try, before you approach the problem, try and just understand what's going on in your partner's world. Like stop and say, tell me what's going on for you. I want to understand. You're obviously hurting. There's something going on right now. You're really upset. You're frustrated. Help me understand. And I will tell you, one of the best feelings in the entire world is when somebody gets you, when they get your experience, when they say, oh, now I get it. Like now I get what's going on for you. Can you think of a good unsolvable problem where we've had an experience like that?
Well, I can talk about.
That's a good one. I can already tell. Go for it.
Just being late versus being on time. I know being late is not a trait of mine that I enjoy. It's not something that I'm just like,
it's not you're proud
yeah,
of.
well, it's just who I am, and I'm just late all the time, and people just need to deal with it. It is embarrassing. I hate it. I wish that I didn't struggle with it. And again, in the beginnings of our marriage, this was something that caused a ton of conflict. But Nate, again, with all these skills that he's been learning and things that we were implementing, sought to understand where I was coming from. And this is going to feel a little therapy-ish. But going back to like my childhood, I suffered from a lot of social anxiety when I was little. I was cripplingly shy, and I really, really was uncomfortable interacting with people. I had a really hard time with it. And
making small talk is not something she enjoys.
In elementary school, before we would go to class, if we got there early, we'd have to line up in line and talk to each other. And this gave me so much anxiety that it was so much better for me to show up 5 minutes late so that I didn't have to wait in line and talk to the other little kids around me, that I made it this deeply ingrained habit that was subconscious when I was a child of being just a little tiny bit late so that I didn't have to worry about this small talk, and I didn't have to worry about, oh my gosh, am I going to be the only one there? And then one other person is going to show up, and then I'm going to have to talk to them, and it's going to be so awkward. And it's something that has creeped into my adult life in a little bit, and that I still experience, even though I'm not shy like I was, I still have that deeply ingrained anxiety over being early. And I think that that was something that when Nate sought to understand where I was coming from, he was able to be a little bit more patient with me as I am striving to be better. He can trust that I'm trying my hardest and I'm doing my best. And even if we're running a little bit late, he can be a little compassionate and empathetic about it, because he knows where I'm coming from and that this isn't just something that I flippantly don't care about. You know, he saw that mutual understanding, and now he understands where I'm coming from.
It was easy for me at first to think like, she's just irresponsible and she just doesn't care. like, or she's just being stubborn or passive aggressive. And then as I learned more and I sought understanding, I was like, oh man, this is like a real internal struggle for her. And like, I can be a little more patient. I can be a little bit more kind. And most of the time when we're a few minutes late, we're actually really not that late. You know, we're pretty on time. Like things haven't started without us. And it's been really helpful. And we, you know, this is a thing that we do a lot in our marriage is that we use the words, help me understand.
Mm-hmm.
Help me understand what's going on for you. Like, tell me. And just like a couple of things that are going to help you do this. And I'm not going to list them on the screen, but if you start with the help me understand, and then you repeat back to your partner word for word what they say, this is like a really powerful exercise because one, it shows that you're listening. Like, don't make up an interpretation of what you heard. Just say back exactly what you heard them say. So one, it shows that you're a great listener. But number two is sometimes when your partner hears their words said back to them, it makes them realize that what they're saying isn't actually what they mean. It helps them crystallize their thoughts and their emotions and their experience. And so you just go through this thing of like, okay, so if I understand correctly, this is how you felt and this is what you experienced. Is that true? Did I get it? Well, yeah, but also this. Okay, so what you're saying, what I hear you saying is this. Did I get it? And eventually your partner's going to go, yeah, you got it. I think you understand it all now. And in that moment, you will see literally, like you can physically see an emotional burden be lifted off of their shoulders merely by the fact that they're understood.
Right.
That's it. Just feeling like somebody gets you, gets your experience, gets the emotions that you're experiencing and sees kind of the world a little bit through your lens just makes people go, oh.
When people feel understood and accepted for who they are, when they feel like their partner really gets where they're coming from, the defense drops, the need to defend themselves lessens, and you can come to this place of, okay, we can manage this. That doesn't mean the problem goes away. The problem is still there, but you can understand a little bit more where they're coming from. And it doesn't make these things okay. It just makes, I'm more willing to work on being on time and to strive as hard as I can be to be able to leave early because I know it's important to Nate because he accepts me for who I am.
Right.
And it doesn't make me lazy and say, oh, well, he accepts me, so I don't need to change.
Yeah.
It actually does the opposite effect in that it inspires me to want to change. And then when we are on time, Nate will say, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I saw the effort that you made to be on time today, and that means a lot to me. Thank you. Because he understands where I'm coming from.
Now, I want to hit on one last thing that I think is really important. It's doing this that allows you to act as the savior in your marriage. If you think about Christ-like love, the reason Christ loves us is because he literally has experienced what we experienced. If there's anybody who can see our experience of life and conflict and struggle and challenges and trials through our eyes, it's Christ. And when you stop and you sit next to your partner and you try to put yourself in their shoes and you try and see the world through their eyes and you try and feel the world through their experiences and through their lens, it turns you into a more Christ-like person. Mm-hmm. It creates a sense of empathy. And the thing that heals us is Christ. Like that is the thing that heals us. And if you can show up when you hear the phrase, like you need to be more Christ-like, this is one of those things. Like this is one of the ways that we'll talk about throughout this series of lessons where you can access being more Christ-like. It's by sitting next to your partner and saying, help me understand. Help me see the world through your eyes. Help me experience this thing that we just went through your lens. And it creates this like really deep and beautiful bond. And there's a lot of couples who miss out on this because they just don't know that it's available to them, or because they might think it's a little cheesy, or they don't want to follow a script. But I just want to tell you guys that one of the most powerful things in the world is when you've got somebody who's living life with you. And even though they're completely different and they come from a different family and they have different desires and goals and talents and quirks and all sorts of, differences, that in the moments when you feel dissonance between you or friction or struggles or trials, you know that they're going to be there to stop and go, help me understand. Mm-hmm. And that is powerful. And that creates safety. It creates trust. It adds to friendship that we talked about. Then I know you, I like you, and I have your back. And like, to me, that's somebody I want to spend eternity with. That's not somebody I just want to tolerate until I die. Like, if I have somebody who's going to have my back forever and is going to be wanting to learn from me and grow and like really get me and help me feel understood and that my experiences and my points of view are valid and my emotions are valid, man, that's a pretty amazing experience. And I got to tell you, like, the thing I love most in this world is being married to this woman right here.
You're
and
so sweet.
It's true. It's so fun. It is so fun being married to Angilyn, and it's fun. It's not fun all the time, but in the times that it's not fun, the reason that it's like so amazing is that I know that she's there to say, help me understand, and that we're going to work through things together. And we're never going to be the couple who just gets so angry at each other that we shut down and we become passive aggressive for a week. And like, it feels like we have this really positive forward momentum. And that's the reason that we're having these lessons on a regular basis, is because we want to share that. Like, I want you, if this is not what you have, or if it's close to what you have, I want you to have more of it. Like, I want you to have what we have. So I'm hoping that these are fun classes and that they're helpful, and that hopefully they're giving you some real insight as to like what our marriage is great, but we are not free from problems.
No.
But having these skills that we're talking about right now, like learning how to have a stop and startup, learning how to share our emotions, learning how to express empathy, like those are the things that make marriage great, and like way better than being single. Now, if our marriage sucked, if we were in a really rocky marriage, I would probably rather be single than married. But because we have these skills, and because we practice them, we actually do what we know. We're doers of the word and not hearers only. It makes marriage amazing. And
it really does.
It's really not that hard. It's a lot easier than you think, even during the hard times.
So I hope that this lesson today helped to put into perspective the purpose that conflict has in your relationships, and that it's not necessarily a bad thing. And it can actually be something that brings you closer together. And that there's a reason why this is an eternal principle, that there's opposition in all things, and that we're given weaknesses so that we can be stronger. There is a purpose for conflict. Now, the whole thing with solvable versus unsolvable problems, there's like 4 chapters on this. It's really hard to condense it into 1 hour. So if you have specific questions that we didn't cover, or something that you want us to clarify,
or if you want us to go deeper,
or if there's something you want us to go deeper, we can plan a whole nother class.
These lessons are not like pre-planned. We don't have an entire curriculum built out. We're just taking them week by week. So we want to be giving you guys what you need. We want to be answering the questions that you have. So if you want us to cover something specific, shoot us an email, drop us a comment, leave us a private Facebook message, and we'll build that stuff into our lessons. All right, guys, that is like a solid hour. Thank you for hanging out with us.
Yes.
Go have an amazing Sunday. Spend a little time outside, soak up some spring sunshine if it's spring where you're at. And then one last thing before we go that would be really helpful is if you know somebody, like maybe you have a ward Facebook page, or maybe you have a group of friends, or like a special group me, or like some text chain, and you think somebody or a group of somebodies would benefit from listening to some of these videos, please just share it with them. Like tag them in the comments or something like that. It would just, like, our goal is to help as many people as we can to have ridiculously awesome marriages. And the only way we can do that is if people like you talk about it. Like, you share, hey, check out this thing I learned. And hopefully we can spread that message a little bit farther. So that is it for our lesson today. Just as always, we'll hang around for a few minutes for anybody who's watching live. If you guys have questions, maybe it's about how to apply this to your specific situation, some of the stuff that you learned today, or maybe you want us to clarify something that we didn't teach super clearly. We're just going to hang around, and you can drop a comment, and we see all the comments that pop up here, and we'll answer it to the best of our ability, or give you some resources that might be helpful. And if you don't have any questions, feel free to take it easy and have a wonderful week. Should we give some homework?
What homework should we give?
I think your homework for this week should be to think of somebody that you've experienced conflict with, or a piece of, in your relationship, a piece of perpetual conflict, and see what magic happens if you approach that person and say, help me understand.
Seeking to understand.
Go seek some mutual understanding this week and see what happens. I'd be really curious to hear what changes in the way the conflict goes or in your heart if you can approach somebody or approach a problem that you've been having with starting from a place of, can you help me understand? I want to understand.
And start with a softened startup and see how that helps to influence the way that the conflict goes. But
Morgan, Natalie, Cassandra, Brentley, Melissa, Bella, thank you for tuning in. I see all you guys on here. Melissa, think about it. Charlene, Jenna, man, awesome people. Thank you for dropping in. Melissa, you're welcome.
Thanks for sharing it, Melissa. We appreciate that.
I love you.
Love you too.
What are we going to do today? Go for a walk?
We're going to go for a walk, and then we're going to play games via Zoom with my family.
Oh, yeah. Maybe eat something.
Hopefully we'll eat something.
I need to nourish and strengthen my body and do it the good it needs. Hey, Brandon, love you back, buddy.
Thanks, Brandon.
Morgan, you're very welcome. Bethany, thank you for tuning in. So glad you love these. They're a lot of fun for us.
We like doing it.
Like every Sunday we wake up and it's like, haha, we get to do another one. It's really fun. I'm so glad that you're enjoying them. There was a little bit, I'm not going to lie, when we started doing these, I was really nervous that people were going to be like, yeah, this is dumb. But the fact that people are enjoying is really great. You have a great day too, Melissa.
All right. It looks like we don't really have questions. So,
okay. Well, we'll catch you guys next week.
See you next week.
Bye.